Thank you. I work for WRAP. It's a resource efficiency charity. Our vision is a world in which resources are used sustainably. We work with governments, businesses, communities to deliver practical solutions to improve resource efficiency. So we do research and evidence, collaboration through voluntary agreements, campaigns, grant making, and evaluation of impact. The problem that we needed a modelling solution for was to look at ways of increasing business recycling. So the reason this came about is a while ago, the UK signed up to the EU Circular Economy Package. And basically, part of that is lots of rules, regulations, and definitions to do with waste management, and also some recycling targets. The waste that we're interested in is municipal waste. So that's waste that is similar in nature and composition to household waste. So you'll see on the picture here things like paper, plastic packaging, glass, food, that sort of thing, things you typically have in the home and need to recycle. So the challenge was, with this circular economy package, we had some targets we needed to reach. So we've signed up to reach 55% municipal recycling by 2025, 60% by 2030, and 65% by 2035. At the moment, our household recycling comes in at around 45%, so we've got a little way to go. But with the new definition and using this household-like waste, we can now also include business waste in this. So this is where the problem came about of how to increase business recycling, so we can all go towards these targets. So at the end of last year, the government launched the new Resources and Waste Strategy. It looks at sustainable production, helping consumers take more considered action, resource recovery and waste management, tackling waste crime, cutting down on food waste, all these great things, research and innovation. And there are currently some consultations out on a government website. You can go and give your opinions on all of this. So this is kind of helping us to drive towards those circular economy package targets that we've got. So we know that at the moment, our household waste at the bottom there just isn't going to make it. There just isn't enough recycling happening there to help us to reach those targets. But all these businesses listed down the side all produce this household-like waste, so paper, glass, food waste, that sort of thing, that could be recycled, or more of it could be recycled and could be used to work towards these targets. So that is where the challenge is. How do we get businesses to recycle more? So we're fully aware that businesses are all going to be affected differently by this. Obviously, it costs to recycle. Getting your waste managed is a costly thing. It's something that businesses have to consider. And we know that big businesses probably isn't going to have much of an impact on them. They've usually got some sort of recycling or waste provision in place. Might just mean they've got to up it a bit, add a few more materials, that sort of thing. But it's the smaller businesses that are really going to be affected, the smaller micro businesses, where there's just a few people, small premises, not a lot of room for bins. How are they going to increase their recycling and really at as a minimal cost as possible? And that was the challenge we were facing. So we consulted with these smaller micro businesses, or the representatives of them. We invited them to a series of workshops, and we discussed what the barriers to recycling were for them and what some of the solutions might be. So obviously some of the barriers they came up with, there's not enough space, they can't add more bins, where are they going to put them? High turnover of staff, they've got to keep training people, keep leaving. The cost always comes up as a big thing. Or just the assumption that they just don't produce enough of that waste to warrant even having that sort of collection. So lots of solutions came up, just a bit of a snapshot. Or things they needed. They wanted lower prices, better access to services, more investment, clearer regulation, more localized support. But one thing that came up that may be a potential solution is collaborative procurement for their waste services. So collaborative procurement basically just means sharing waste and waste services. At the moment, you can go down a street and each business potentially could be using a different waste collector. So you've got all these different waste vehicles coming into a street or an area every day, all through the day, and collecting just individual businesses, and it just seems really inefficient. It causes congestion, air pollution, all these sorts of things. So the idea of this collaborative procurement is to share these services. So characteristics of this waste zoning, where they share these services, so that a city or a region is divided into zones. Waste management companies, waste collectors, could bid for the business within parts of these zones. have long-term contracts, potentially pay a franchise fee to the city or to the local authority. There would be price caps to businesses, potentially lowering prices so that more businesses could be encouraged to do recycling. And the idea and the rationale behind it is to reduce vehicle movements, because at the moment there's loads, there's just different vehicles from different companies coming in and out all the time. Reduce costs potentially, hopefully increase recycling, improve service quality, and reduce air pollution too, which is quite an important thing. So where did this all start? It's happening globally, lots of different places, but in America they were one of the forefront of this. So in Los Angeles, they did some waste zoning quite a while ago, and it seemed to work quite well. And in New York, a study recommended that would definitely work for New York, sort of separating these areas and having just one waste provider to come in. And I think they're sort of tendering for those at the moment, so it's all looking quite good. But we wanted to see what would happen in England and how this could potentially help us here. So the aim of the project was to investigate benefits of waste licensing zones in terms of how this may affect waste collections, service costs, air pollution, and we were looking at very urban areas in 4 cities. So we carried out surveys of businesses in these 4 cities, and I'll go into that a bit more in a moment. In these zones, we kind of created zones. We worked with these local authorities to pick a zone of about 500 businesses where we would focus our studies on. And then the modelling comes in, and we worked with Optrack, and they did some modelling for us to create a baseline of what's going on at the moment, you know, how many different waste contractors are coming in and collecting the waste. And then we modelled different scenarios where perhaps just one company was coming into those areas and collecting the waste. And also where we increase recycling, because ultimately that's what we want to do. We want to increase recycling, get these businesses recycling more. So the business waste surveys was basically people on the ground in these zones. They came along, went to each individual business, spoke to the people there, and collected information on the type and size of business, the waste streams that they were collecting. So are they collecting paper, glass, food? What are they actually collecting? The number and types of waste container, what bins have they got, where are they? The frequency of these waste collections, how often are they being collected? In some places they're being collected every day, sometimes more than once. And the name of the waste collector, so we could kind of see how many waste collectors were coming into these quite compact zones. So Optrack worked their magic, doing some routing and used their routing software to kind of map out what was going on. And we got some interesting results. I mean, it turns out, I think it was in one zone, there was up to 20 waste collectors coming in, something like that. So there's just multiple people coming in, and it just seems like a really inefficient way of running things. So some of the initial results. We've got the 4 cities here with 4 different scenarios. This is looking at the costs. There's the baseline at the top for each one. Then there's where a single contractor is collecting the waste. Where we increase recycling, obviously it does have an increase in costs because they're going to have more bins, more collections. But what you can see from this chart, hopefully, it's the 3rd one down on each city, is that if they increase their recycling, but they only have one contractor, actually the costs come down a little bit, whether it's near to what the baseline is, what's going on at the moment, or just slightly less. So this could be a way to encourage people to do more, businesses to do more recycling, so we can reach these targets. Got them to do some, Optrack to do some more modelling, so we could see what really is the potential here. And I won't go through this, but just to say, we looked at different scenarios where there were different numbers of waste collections, reducing them, seeing if people could keep their waste for a bit longer and have them collected at fewer moments during the week. And we managed to make even more savings, but obviously that might not be practical for all local authorities. But the next steps of the project, we're going to be talking to the local authorities that were involved about implementation. Practically, how would that work on the ground? Is this something they would be interested in? Is this something that they think they could put into place? What sort of resources would they need to do that? And we're also talking to the government about what legislation would need to be in place to actually allow local authorities to create these zones, because at the moment they can't. I mean, it wouldn't be allowed, but what sort of things would need to be in place so they can have these zones and have just one waste provider coming in. And as well, we would really like to investigate, these were very busy kind of city centres. We'd like to investigate suburban and rural areas and see if we can get the same benefits there and see if that can be another thing to help us to increase business recycling. Thank you, that's all I was going to say.